Well, hi, thank you. I feel like I've been massively built up now, so we'll bring it all back down to reality. Yeah, thanks for spending your lunchtime with us for this masterclass. I was really delighted to be asked actually to come and speak to you guys because working with the apprenticeship schemes is really important to me, and we do a lot of work at Wavemaker, which is the agency that I lead, to really make sure that we're bringing all sorts of talented people into the agency and trying to make media and creative and digital careers a really exciting opportunity for all of you. So I was thinking, what on earth should I talk about when I was asked to come and do this masterclass? And I watched the video of the last one. I was like, that's pretty good. So how am I going to top that? I don't necessarily think I'll top it, but we'll try and keep it at the same level. So I was thinking, what is something that I've learned along the way that I thought might be useful to share, because I've been in media for about just over 20 years. And I do quite a lot of sessions where we do sort of mentoring with different people in different situations. And I always find that there's a question that's often asked, which is, how did you get to where you are? Which is a really difficult question to answer because, frankly, personally anyway, I feel like it's a complete accident and a complete stroke of luck. So I can't claim that there's any design to my career path. But one thing I always say is that I really believe in the importance of zigzagging your way through your career. So I thought actually that would be a really useful thing to talk about for all of you, given that you're at the start of your careers and coming to the end of your apprenticeship program and starting to think about what happens next. So I thought actually if I can leave with you some wisdom, some pearls of wisdom about how you might zigzag your way through your career and the value of zigzagging, then hopefully this will be half an hour well spent. So the importance of zigzagging. So first of all, who am I and what the hell is a Chief Operating Officer? So so I've been in this role for about 7 weeks, so it's quite fresh. I was promoted into that role having previously been the managing director of the same agency and another agency just before that. And it was quite an interesting proposition that was put forward to me when I was asked to take this role, because I was already the managing director and I'd been doing that for a few years, and we had a bit of shuffling around of our leadership, and they asked me if I would take the COO role. And it wasn't a role that I'd ever thought about doing at all. Didn't really necessarily think of myself as somebody who works with operations, which feels like quite a kind of big lofty thing. And I was also quite happy being managing director, to be quite honest. So I went away and I had a meeting about it with our global boss, and I went away and I went home and I chatted to my husband. I was like, he asked me to be the COO. I'm quite sure what to do with that. And we sort of talked it through, and actually the reason why I concluded after a couple of glasses of wine and a good chat that it was a really good opportunity was that it would allow me to see the business from a different side. And that's really important because ultimately you need to build as much experience as possible. And as COO, my role is very broad. So what do I do all day? Well, I do any of these things and a whole load of other stuff as well. So one day I might be dealing with clients, so I might be going down to meet with the CEO of a client's business or the CMO, the Chief Marketing Officer. I might be going to work with one of our client teams and just represent the kind of senior management at a meeting. And that might be one day a BMW meeting, the next day a L'Oreal meeting, the following day a meeting with Virgin Games. So it could be anything in any sector. So I have to be able to flex my style of meeting, but also learn really quickly about our different clients each time I have to go to one of those meetings. So it's quite tricky. Then I have to deal with the operations of the agency. So operations is quite difficult to explain because it's a sort of catch-all for everything that isn't client-facing, I suppose. So stuff like, how are we structured? How do we fit our departments together? What kind of roles do we think we need in the agency for people? How do we make sure that the building is running properly? Like if something breaks in the building, somehow that ends up on my desk. So all of the stuff that clients don't necessarily buy or see, the stuff behind the scenes, falls under operations. Then revenue, so how do we make money? How do we make sure that we're driving as much revenue into the business as possible? And then how do we make sure we're spending that money in a way that gives us the best return as a business? So managing the revenue of the business. Then also dealing with people and culture. So how do we make sure that everyone has really excellent careers at Wavemaker? How do we train people in the right way? How do we make sure that people can move around the agency? How do I make sure that the agency has a really strong sense of itself, so a really strong culture, and that we're providing all the kind of benefits and perks that help people to want to stay at Wavemaker as much as possible? And then pitching for new clients. So yesterday, in fact, I was down at the RNLI in Poole in Dorset pitching for their business. And that's something that we do a lot of, and I'm sure if you're working in agencies, you'll have seen it because it's pretty difficult not to be touched by it at some point. So all the time there's pitching going on, and as a member of the senior board, I suppose, we always have to take responsibility for new business pitches. So suddenly I might have to drop all of the 4 things above that and just spend my entire week working on a new business pitch to make sure we have the best chance of success. So as you can probably see, it's quite a broad spectrum of stuff that my role involves. And when I think about it, all of the things that I've done in the 20 years leading up to this point have given me the best chance of making a success of that role, because all of the things that I've done, all of the different roles that I've had and the different steps I've taken in my career have given me a different point of view, a different perspective, a different angle, and a degree of experience in one or other of these areas that mean that I have some confidence going into that role that I can apply that experience in a relevant way. And I guess that's really important because coming into your career, everyone thinks that your career path looks like this. So everyone talks about the career ladder, and you think you come in and you learn a role, and you'll all be training at the moment in a specific role, and then you want to climb the career ladder as quickly as possible. And everyone gets really obsessed with promotion. So promotion is the thing that everyone seeks. You get really restless when you haven't been promoted at the same time as someone else. And I get that, of course. Everyone wants to be successful, and everyone wants to climb that ladder as quickly as possible. And that's totally understandable, totally human. And if you're anything like me, I'm incredibly competitive, so I just can't help wanting to get to the next step as quickly as possible. So you start at the bottom and you work your way to the top in a linear way. But actually, for me personally, and increasingly from what I see of people that I work with that are coming up through the agency and getting themselves into senior roles, actually the career path looks a lot more like this. It's a lot more like a random platform game, right? So you start at the bottom, hopefully you don't encounter some weird elephant with an apple in its trunk. You come along, you move sideways for a little bit, you find an opportunity to move up on a ladder, so you go up that ladder, you move around on that level for a bit, you learn what's going on, you might encounter some scary penguins with axes, but hopefully not too many. You decide that there's another ladder over there that you could climb, but actually you quite like the ladder over there, so you go up that one for a bit, and so on and so forth until you end up somewhere near the top, hopefully. And that's great. It's really good to go that way. It's really good to work your way through your career like you're playing Donkey Kong. It really helps to have that experience and encounter different people along the way, different challenges, different opportunities that you can measure up against each other. And it doesn't matter that someone else might be starting here and going straight up the ladder. That's fine, because everyone's different and everyone will grow their career in a different way. And there'll always be a need for specialists. So some people have a very specific skill set and they want to apply that skill set and work their way up in that one channel. That's cool, but often when you're starting out, you don't necessarily know what that special skill set is. And so the more you can move around and try different things, the more you'll learn what your unique talent is and what you're going to bring to the agency and the business that's going to be of value in the long run. So let me talk to you about my weird ziggy-zaggy path that led me to the COO role. So I left uni in 1997. I didn't know at all what I wanted to do at that point, I have to say, and that was fine. So I fell into media completely by accident because I was trying to get a job in a creative agency and I couldn't get in, so I ended up going into a media agency. So I started off as a TV buying assistant at Zenith Media, and I did that for a year. I passed my kind of graduate trainee year, and I quite liked it. I enjoyed the land of agencies. I wasn't quite sure about Zenith at that time. I had a slightly dodgy manager. So I left there and I went to be a broadcast media buyer, which at the time meant TV and radio and cinema. So those were the channels available in the broadcast world at that point. So I moved to Cara. So I worked at Cara as a broadcast media buyer. And I did that for a bit, and that was great, and I learned about more channels, so I was building my experience a bit, and I had a really interesting team and some good clients. And so I got promoted, so I became a broadcast media manager. So I then sort of learned to manage people and train other people to learn to be broadcast buyers and planners as well. And then I started to think that the next couple of stages of that world, that kind of media buying world, weren't necessarily where I would enjoy my next few steps the most. So moving up in that sort of broadcast media buying channel meant that I'd have to do a lot more negotiation. It became much more trading focused, and I wasn't really sure that that was my skill set. So I started looking around inside the agency at what I might do next, and an opportunity came up to become a comms planning manager. So it was a completely sideways move. I felt like I was kind of okay with that because I didn't really know what I was doing as a planner, so I thought that's fine, I can go sideways, be a planner for a bit, see how that goes, and I really enjoyed it. So I did planning for a few years, got promoted again, became a comms planning director. And that was great, and I had some amazing clients. I was really lucky. I was always working on really good clients, and I was always learning new things with those clients. But then I thought, actually, I feel like I need to do something else now. So as soon as I got to the point where I felt I wasn't learning as much anymore, I thought, I might go and do another shunt sideways across the way, across the office to the other side. So I took a role as a strategy director. So again, it was a completely sideways move. There was no promotion involved. But I just thought strategy was quite interesting, and it gave me a side of the world that I hadn't necessarily seen yet. And I did that for a couple of years, and again, I really enjoyed it, actually. I thought it was great. I had very different conversations with clients than I'd had as a planner, which was good because it gave me a different angle on understanding clients' business. And then if I can click, hopefully. Oh, hang on. I have to come back over here. Oh dear, I think we might have frozen. It's stuck. Oh, there we go. Right, okay, we might be there. Hopefully, it's because I've put so many builds in, I should have known. Yeah, so after being strategy director for a bit, I was asked to take over as a client leader. So I was running Diageo, which is things like Smirnoff and Guinness and Gordon's Gin and stuff like that. And that was a sort of integrated client role. So that was great because that gave me a position on the board. So that was great as well. And a position of much more sort of general management rather than just focusing on the client's business. And so I did that for a couple of years, and then I asked to move into an international role. So what I hadn't done in my career path to date at that point was run any clients that were across more than one market. And actually, that's a really useful thing to do because it's a very different job to just managing a client in one market. So I asked if I could run a group of markets for Johnson & Johnson. And it was fantastic. So it gave me a bit of chance to travel around. So I was running all of the Nordic regions, so really good countries to visit like Sweden and Denmark. And it was a really nice a small cluster of countries that I was able to run. I got to know the teams really well, so it wasn't too vast and unwieldy. But it gave me really useful experience in managing and running multi-market client business. I was then offered the role of managing director at Maxis, which is one of the agencies that formed Wavemaker, and most recently became chief operating officer. So as you can see, it's been really ziggy-zaggy. And whilst I am really competitive, as I said, and would have come into my career thinking, right, I'm going to just climb that ladder as quickly as possible and go up in a straight line, actually, it's only because I took all those other steps that I got the MD role when it came up and when I started interviewing for it, because I had such a broad perspective on how agencies run, about how different clients work, and I built so many different types of client relationships that gave me a really strong competitive advantage against the other candidates when I was first interviewing for that MD role. And most importantly, I just had done loads of different jobs along the way, so I just had so many different tasks to fulfill. So I'd done all of these things and probably loads more that I couldn't fit on the chart. So everything from how to negotiate to how to run a team, to how to do project management, to new business pitching, to managing a P&L, and even how to merge companies, which frankly no one tells you how to do, but suddenly you just have to deal with it. So it's really helpful to have taken those steps and gone in lots of different directions. And I did all of that within the media agency sector, but it's also really valuable to do that moving around in different types of agency and different types of business. So you see different sides of the coin. And often that comes about through working with lots of different clients. So these are some of the clients that I was exposed to as a result of those various steps and those different directions that I travelled in along that ziggy-zaggy path. And often what happens in the course of working on those clients' businesses is that you get the chance actually to go and work client side. So what I saw often in the teams that I was working in was small opportunities would come up client side to go and do secondment. So it might be that, you know, somebody at your client was going on maternity leave and there was a 6-month gap, and we would put people from our team into their businesses to fill that role for 6 months. And if you get the chance to do that at any point, I really recommend that you do it, because it's so useful to see a client business from the inside. And also, undoubtedly, you'll all get to work with some pretty funky brands, so it's really good to just be part of that and be part of building up those brands. So I've worked with a massive spectrum of brands, from really cool aspirational brands like Louis Vuitton and BMW and Maserati, to things that aren't quite so cool and funky like Imodium. But all of that is useful because you get a very different sense of business and how businesses are run and some of the rules and regulations that are there around different types of business. So it's always good to work on a massive range of brands, even if they aren't at first glance ones that you think, yeah, I'd really love to work on Nicorette. That sounds really interesting. It always teaches you something. So this is Sarah. So Sarah is our innovation director at Wavemaker, and she's another great example of why it's good to zigzag around. So Sarah's been with us for a couple of years now, and she is an absolutely incredible part of our business. She's the girl that works with all the tech startup businesses and all the kind of businesses that are really starting to grow and often have a very unique product that they're trying to find a way to sell to different clients. And she takes that opportunity and she tries to match it to client challenges that we have so that they can build their success through our clients, and obviously we therefore enable our clients to achieve success through a new piece of technology. So she's had a really ziggy-zaggy career as well. So Sarah started as a marketing assistant. So she worked at P&G for about 7 years, starting as a marketing assistant and working her way up through the ranks of sort of brand manager and up to marketing manager. And that's incredibly valuable. She's got incredible understanding and knowledge of how to build brands. But she did the same sort of thing as me, where she thought, I've been doing this for a bit and I feel like I'm not learning as much. And she then moved across, still within a client business, but she took over running their media. So she became the media person that we as agencies deal with within our clients' business. And she did that in the UK. And then they offered her the chance to go and do it in the US, to run comms and digital at the same client. So she went and worked over there for a bit and spent a few years in New York, which she obviously absolutely loved. So she worked her way up and she was really enjoying life again. And she became the digital comms lead. So the market started to change. So it was moving from the more traditional media channels that we're all familiar with, and the digital bubble started to explode. And she saw that explosion happening and thought, actually, I need to be part of that. I need to be able to be as skilled and experienced in this world of digital as I am in these more traditional marketing channels. So she took a role as digital comms lead, and she started to build her craft and her understanding of digital and technology in particular. And she then saw an opportunity to become the chief marketing officer of a tech startup. So in her role as digital comms lead, she started working with this business that, again, was this very small business, just a couple of guys that had this idea. And they were really looking for someone with understanding of bigger kind of client business and media to help them launch to market and really grow that business. So she took a massive risk at that point and became CMO of this tech startup, which literally had about 4 people in it. So although she had this almighty title, actually there was only 4 of them, so she's probably like cleaning the floors and making the tea as well. But for her, being a person that was passionate about innovation and technology and digital media in particular, getting into a tech startup at that sort of period was hugely exciting. And she just thought, you know what, if it doesn't come off, I'll move on after a year or 18 months, and it won't have done any damage at all because I'll still have learnt a lot in that time. So she did that for a little while, and then she had her first child, so she decided she probably needed something a little bit more stable. So luckily for us, she came to us as our innovation director, which is where she is now. So again, really quite different steps in her career, but all the time thinking about how she could learn, what she could bring to those different roles and what those different roles would give her in order to make sure that she was always moving forward. And what she says is that every role that she zigzagged her way through enabled her to become better and to become more knowledgeable. And it helped her feel that she was adding value in new ways, and those roles all brought different things to her. And the key thing, which I completely agree with, is that she had no idea really what she was doing at the time, so there was no master plan there. It's just that the opportunities arose and she grabbed them because she could see that that was going to ultimately be a good next step. So she was brave, I think. It's really important. So, zigzagging in our industry is quite common. But actually, zigzagging in general is very common. And often we don't necessarily know the career paths of people that are around and about in the world of the famous. So I thought I'd test you on some other famous zigzaggers to see whether you can work out who they are. So I've got 3. I think they're really easy, so we'll see where we go. So this person started as a military academy graduate. So that was his first step in his career. He then became a trainee in the family business. So he moved over, he graduated from military college and then went and worked with his dad for a few years. He then became a property developer. So he started investing in property, became quite successful in that area, started making a bit of money. And because he'd been successful in that, he wrote a book about how to become a successful property mogul and build your cash reserves that way. He then became a hotels and casinos entrepreneur, quite well known, in fact. Made a lot of money through those slightly less pure, shall we say, business channels. And after that, he became the owner of a model management firm. Anyone getting this yet? Yes. He then became a reality TV star, and good Lord, he then became the president. So, Donald Trump. So, okay, not necessarily somebody whose career paths we all want to follow, although it's not bad to be the president of the US. But, you know, who knows whether that kind of zigzag pathway was part of his master plan or not. But there's no doubt that having worked in all those different business environments, having built up that knowledge and experience from scratch in the way that he has, and having learned to deal with all the different characters that are involved in each of those different business enterprises, has undoubtedly made him fairly well equipped to deal with being president of the US. So let's try another one. So this person started off as a bodybuilder and became Mr. Universe. He then became an actor. He then became state governor of California and wasn't particularly successful, so now he's gone back to acting. So I almost put that line going down, but I thought that was a bit rude. So yeah, so Arnold Schwarzenegger. So again, perhaps not quite as many steps in his career, but certainly made some quite big segues from one type of industry to another because he felt that he had something to offer that was worth trying out for a while, I suppose. So one more. So this maybe isn't quite as obvious. So this chap started as a ranch hand. So again, it's another American. I'm sorry, they're all American. This chap started as a ranch hand. He then founded a group of summer camps in 3 US states. So he did that for a while, very successful actually, apparently. And then he finished all his studies and started to get into programming and became an analyst working for a technology company. And quite enjoyed that, was quite good. He kind of did it as a bit of a hobby, I guess, but he worked quite well. But then he went into investment banking, so he was sought out in his skills as an analyst, and he worked at a number of investment banking companies in the US and became very successful. So his career path is something like he was the most successful investment banker over the shortest period of time ever. So very successful in investment banking and was making a lot of money, as you would expect at that time. But sort of again became a bit restless and like, oh, I don't really want to spend the next 30 years of my life just being an investment banker. So he became an online bookstore entrepreneur. So he started up a very small business in his garage selling books online. And that business exploded and really became the start of the most pioneering e-commerce business in the world, which then moved into technology production. So they started to produce actual pieces of kit, which started to rival Apple and the likes. And then they started buying content assets. So they're becoming the most exciting, I would say, most significant media business in the world, whilst also building a space travel business. So he is starting to explore space travel for normal consumers like you and I. Who is it? No, not Richard Branson. Jeff Bezos, exactly, the founder of Amazon. So this man is worth $48 billion, apparently. The fifth richest man in the world. Started Amazon bookstore from his garage. So very ziggy-zaggy career and really interesting and, you know, an amazing businessman. So I guess all of those examples show that there is real merit to moving around. So there are loads of benefits, but the main ones I would say are transferable skills. So even when you're moving from being an investment banker to an online bookstore owner, there are always transferable skills. And it could be as simple as you're just learning about how to deal with people, how to work with people. Or it could be that you're learning about how to manage business, how to manage budgets, for example, how to drive revenue, how to sell, how to negotiate. The skills are always transferable, no matter how big that jump from one career path to another might be. You should always be learning. So my one rule, the only kind of master plan bit that I've had in my career at all ever is if I'm not learning, then I need to move on. And I think that's a really useful rule of thumb just to help guide you in when you should be looking to move on in your career. And as I say, that move might be sideways or could be downwards or could be upwards. But ultimately, you should be expecting to learn all the time in your career, and I learn every day, and that's really important to me. If it starts to feel stale, then it's time to move on. You build empathy the more you move around. And that's really important. It's such an important skill because particularly in these industries, in the creative media and digital industries, ultimately, even though AI and VR and AR and all of those things are growing really fast and becoming really important to us as businesses, we are still at heart a people business, and the most successful people in our agencies are the people that work brilliantly with other people and that can empathize with other people. And that's the people around you, your teams that you work with, but also with clients. You know, the best client people are people that go into a room having spent a week writing a presentation that they're really, really proud of, walk in the room, see the client looking really stressed and pissed off about something, and go, all right, I'm not going to present all that work, I'm just going to find out what's wrong with the client. So they put their own agenda aside and they just sit and listen to the client. And I can tell you that will be worth more than that 20-page deck that you spent a week creating, because you understood that the client had something on her mind, his mind, and you addressed it right there and then. So you're working as a partner. So building empathy and learning to work with different types of people in different roles is really important. It also helps you to know yourself. So the more you move around, the more you learn about yourself and what you enjoy doing and what you're good at and what value you bring and how you work effectively with different types of teams and in different structures. And I think when you start out, you always have a bit of a sense of the things that you enjoy. You know at school that you were good at maths and not so good at drama, or you enjoyed art but you didn't really like computer science, or whatever it might be. So you have a little bit of a sense of where your natural skill sets lie, but you change so much, you know. So the more jobs you can do, the more different things you can try, the more you start to learn about what really makes you tick and what you think you can get the best out of and will bring the best out of you in your career. And also life changes as well. So things go on in your life that just change your perspective and change what you need. You know, going back to Sarah, who was having an amazing time working in New York, she then had a baby and she decided it probably wasn't the environment that she wanted to bring her baby up in. So she moved back to the UK and took a job in a much more sort of stable group business. And that was right for her at that time. And things like that happen all the way. So having a sense of your own confidence in being open-minded to things that are new is really helpful, because things will happen over the next 10, 15, 20 years, however long, that just mean that you just might want something different. But most importantly, it will give you competitive advantage. So coming to a job interview for a role where you've had a number of different perspectives on that role, I can tell you now, as someone that interviews a lot of people for different things, I always find hugely valuable when I look at a CV that's, unless it's a very, very narrow job role where there's a specific technical skill that we're looking for. Generally speaking, if it's any kind of role that needs people management or business management or client interaction, when I can see that somebody's had 2 or 3 different angles on a role, I find as an employer that puts that candidate ahead of the others in their set. So it gives you that competitive advantage, and we all know how competitive the workplace is these days, and all jobs are so highly sought after and so fought for that anything like that adds a different string to your bow is hugely helpful. This happened earlier, actually, didn't it? A couple of times. I think we're pretty much there. So I guess the other piece of context which is really helpful, I hope, for you guys in your situations right now is there are so many more opportunities. So when I started out, and for the sort of 30 years of past media world in particular, there were really only 4 different types of job. So if you were creative and organised, then you were a media planner. If you were good at numbers and negotiation, you were a media buyer. If you were interested in psychology and sociology, then you became a strategist. And if you hadn't got a degree, then you went into some kind of admin or support role, and that was it, right? That was a career path, the career opportunities in a media agency. But now, in our sector, there are just the most wide range of opportunities and different job roles available. And even within our agency, at Wavemaker, we have 3 very different types of product and marketing service that we offer. And there are hundreds of different job roles. So I just had a look at a list of all the different job roles we have at Wavemaker, and it is really vast. So in media as a banner, you can be a video activation specialist, you can be an investment director, you could be a regional media planner, you could be a performance media planner, you could design customer journeys, consumer journeys, and a whole load of others. Or you could be in our content division. So you could be a creative director, you could be a content analyst, you could be an events lead, you could be a community manager or an organic performance manager, and again, a whole load of other things. Or you might want to be in technology, so you might want to be an analyst or a programmer or an econometrician or an ad ops person or a consumer research manager. So in many ways, if you limit yourself just to sort of one channel, one pathway within our industry, you're missing out on so much, because look at all the job roles that there are. It's really exciting, and I think there's never been a more exciting time to be in our sector, because whilst everyone talks all the time about how quickly things are changing and how there's never been a more challenging time in marketing than there is now, actually there's never been a more exciting time either, because there are always new jobs emerging, new roles, new specialisms, and all of the agencies like mine and all the others that are in our industry are all grabbing at those new opportunities so that they can gain a competitive advantage with clients. So if you have an interest and a skill that you want to explore, or just a curiosity, there will always be something that you can try which will add that different dimension to your CV and to your skill set. So remember, most importantly, that where you start is just where you start. It doesn't define in any way where you end up, or even the next step, really, that you're going to take. So the most important thing is to start your career in a place where you feel that you can learn and in a role that interests you. And then just keep an open mind. Get to know as much of the business as you possibly can and look around at the opportunities that are out there, because there will always be opportunities to learn. And whilst you might be coming to the end of your apprenticeship, which you'll think of as your main learning opportunity, actually your whole career should be a big learning opportunity. So look for those chances to follow that ziggy-zaggy line, because it will always give you a better chance of getting to the top of that platform and that ziggy-zaggy ladder. That's it. I'm really happy to take questions, as long as they're not too difficult. So, sorry, there's a guy behind you whose hand was up first.
On your zigzagging journey, what was your most challenging?
I would say probably move over here so I can see you. I would say probably moving to managing director actually was my most difficult jump, because the role I was doing before that was just working on one client. So it was working across lots of markets, but ultimately I just had to know about that one client. So I knew their business inside out and back to front. And then I jumped up to managing director, and suddenly, having been like deep in one client, I had to be really thinly spread across loads of clients and do other stuff as well, like people and culture type stuff. And to start with, I found that really difficult because I felt like I wasn't adding any value. You know, I'd go to meetings and I'd know that much about the client's business, and everyone else would know like everything else underneath. And it took me probably 6 months to feel comfortable about that. And lots of good reassurance from the people I was working with. So, no, it's fine, that is your role, it's fine, you don't need to know everything. So I think getting used to feeling a little bit out of your depth at the beginning actually is fine. But it takes time to adjust, particularly where you go from one very sort of specialist part of a role to something that's more general. Yeah, I think it's highly unlikely that anyone would go backwards, unless you specifically want to. So I have known people that have, you know, just decided to sort of take a step back in their career to give themselves more time with family, or, you know, to get more balance, or, you know, that just feel like they jumped up into a higher level role, but actually it's not really for them, and they kind of prefer what they were doing before. So I think that's unusual. So in most cases, you might, if you jump across, you sort of feel to start with like you've stepped back a bit because you're sort of learning all over again. But quite quickly you realise that the experience you had in your previous role or roles give you something quite different to bring to that new role, and therefore suddenly you sort of jump ahead again. So I think in most cases, you wouldn't feel like you were going backwards, or certainly not for very long. And obviously, you always know roughly where the levels are within different parts of the business. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so I think that's a really good question. And actually, we were talking at the beginning before we started about how I often get frustrated that people bounce out of the agency when I feel like they could have learned so much more staying with us. So I think sometimes there's a difference between bouncing around within an agency where you're looking to learn new things or see something from a different side or just try a different role, and then bouncing out of an agency where people feel like they just want to try something different. And actually, I think it's all too easy to feel like you need to jump outside to get a new set of experiences. I think I would say if you're moving around within a year of doing a role, I would say that would be too soon, because I think it takes at least a year to get a sense of a role. You know, the first 2 or 3 months, you know, you're just really kind of working out what's what. And then it's only really once you've been working on enough projects over those next few months that you can actually start to see the value of what you're doing, you know, and you can really feel like you're making a difference. So normally I would say 18 months or so is enough time in a role to feel like you've either got enough out of the role and you're happy to stay in it and kind of work your way towards the next level within that role, or you're perhaps feeling like you might want to try something different. If it's less than that, I'd be a bit concerned that, you know, it might look a bit like you were just restless. Oh, yeah.
What would you say is your biggest?
Oh my goodness. Well, this is going to sound massively like I've just said this because of this room, but I actually think the biggest achievement was launching the apprenticeship program at Maxus, the agency I was at before this one, which we called Maxus Calling, because I was really passionate about social mobility and trying to find talent from less obvious channels. So when I joined the agency as MD, we had a really fantastic group of people. The teams were just brilliant. But when I started to see our grad recruitment, it was all really similar people, and they were great, but they were all the same, really. They were like kind of identikits of each other. And so I saw the apprenticeship program as an opportunity to really seek out different talent from different parts of society and different backgrounds and different cultures and so on. And the first year that we launched that, it was just massively successful. So we had incredible talent that came through the door. And we also ran this open day. So we did an open day for 50 people just to come and spend, all of people like you, just to come and spend the day with us, just getting a sense of what the agency was like and what it was like being in an office, and you know what people like me were like, and you know, just to kind of demystify all of that scary kind of office world. And that day was just incredible. Like, it was probably the best day I had in my whole career, because it was just so exciting to see all this fresh talent who were really excited to join us. We offered 5 apprenticeship roles at the end of that day, so it was like a live hire day. And then we also offered 4 other people jobs. We just had exec roles that we just thought, you're great, so please can you come and do this job? So suddenly we had all this new talent that had come to us, and it was really exciting. So then seeing we're kind of in the 3rd year, we've kind of evolved it a bit now as we go into Wavemaker, but the roots of it and the kind of basis of it are the same, and that I just felt really proud of that, because yes, we do brilliant work for clients, driving their business, but ultimately for me it was much more about giving people opportunities and feeling like that we'd made a difference to people. What did you say? Sorry, I missed the...
What is like a key indicator when you
I think you should feel slightly uncomfortable and challenged in what you're doing. So if you feel like you're just repeating the same task all the time, then okay, you might be really good at it, but you're not learning from that. So I still feel pretty much every day like I go into meetings where I'm like, I've never done this before, I don't know what I'm talking about here. And that's quite good, really, because you know you can do it. Obviously, you wouldn't go into a room thinking that you had no idea what was going on, but that sort of feeling slightly stretched and slightly out of your comfort zone, I think is what you should be looking for at least once a week, if not every day. Yeah.
Would you say then that your level of seniority does always correspond to specialised writing? Director to strategy. So is the level of it like manager, director role? Because sort of moved up in that linear ladder.
Yeah.
The strategy exec all the way up to the strategy director.
Yeah.
Maybe more specialised.
I think it really depends on what the role is. So I think if you take that example of strategists, I've seen really brilliant strategists come in at strategy director level that have never done that job before, and they've just been doing other things that collectively have added up to quite an interesting perspective on strategy. I think the more senior you get, the more likely your role is to be more general, so more general management than specialist, which is why often having a range of experience is helpful. Having said that, there are roles now, increasingly so, where training up in a particular technical skill is really important. And I think one of the things we see now is that we are starting to get to the point where there's certain roles where to be a senior specialist technician, particularly in things like paid search as an example. You know, you need to be trained, you need to pass exams, you need to learn how the platforms work. And actually you get to a point where your next step might be, so say you're a PPC manager, your next step might be a PPC director or a performance director. And with that role comes a whole load of people management. And often the thing that made you really good about being a PPC manager is very different to the thing that would make you really good at being a people manager. And I think it gets to the point where you sort of, if you're a very specialist technician in a certain area like that, you sort of need to decide whether you want to also be a people manager or not, because that's where sometimes people just don't feel that they have much interest in that area, which is also fine, because I think for us, we're starting to sort of break out those responsibilities a bit more. So, which is why I say I think being a specialist is fine, and there's nothing wrong with that at all, as long as you're pretty comfortable that that's the area that you're going to win at, I suppose, rather than being a bit broader in your horizons. Yeah, contracting is tricky. So it's a really good question, because there's obviously a bit of a trend at the moment in our sector around contracting, particularly in certain parts of the business. And I think it works for some people, but for most people it doesn't work as well as they think. So what it often does is give you the chance to increase how much you're earning for the job that you do. But the trade-off, obviously, is massive uncertainty. So you have no security. You won't be earning a pension. You know, you often don't get all of the other perks like private medical and bits and bobs like that. And obviously, if you take holiday, you're not getting paid for that holiday. So there's a lot of risk around contracting that I think most people underestimate. So I tend to see people that jump out of a kind of a full-time kind of contract into a contractor role, and often they come back again into a full-time role, because I think people like to feel like they're part of something. So, you know, it's very difficult to feel like you're part of an agency if you know you're only there for 3 months. Whereas obviously if you're a permanent member of staff, you get to get involved in the agency and help to build the culture of the agency and be really part of it. So for some people it works fine, but I think for a lot of people it's that sort of grass is greener effect doesn't quite work through. Any more?
I have a question.
Okay.
One of the slides, the one earlier on, you mentioned the slide about what you do now. And one of the points was around revenue. So how important is it to start getting managing budgets and money?
Yeah.
How do you get better at it?
Oh, it's a really good question, because I think actually as an industry we're quite poor at helping people to become really savvy with budget management and P&L, learning how to read a P&L or how to manage P&L. But it's ironic in a way, because actually, particularly in media, we're dealing with budget management all the time. Even if you're an assistant, you know, you're dealing with purchase orders or reconciliation. And actually, I think it's really important to recognise the specific commercial skill set or budgetary skill set that you have at each different stage of a job. So, you know, we like to identify that PO reconciliation, which is an incredibly boring job, but is critically important to the business, to try and show the value of that contribution, so that at every level, no matter what you're doing, everyone understands that that particular task and that particular responsibility is adding up to us hitting our budget at the end of the year, and trying to help people understand how each of their own steps adds up ultimately to that top level step. But I think we need to do more in general to raise understanding and training of budget management and revenue management and P&L. I think it's particularly poor for women. So there's been a big push at WPP recently actually to create training for female leaders in P&L management, because it's such a typically male sort of dominated environment, and often the sort of skills that you associate with being a CFO are skills that are quite male. So I think it's even more challenging for women, but it is really important, because you do suddenly get to the point where you're like, oh shit, I actually need to deal with the P&L myself. And nobody's told you how to do that. So I think we have to probably make an effort more ourselves to make sure that we're looking for the opportunities to learn, but also to make sure that our people understand how each of the tasks that they have in their set of roles and responsibilities ultimately adds up to that budget success year on year.
Because we get asked that a lot actually. Sort of getting comfortable with
Absolutely, yeah.
how much money we should be earning. So yeah, that's.
Along your zigzagging journey, would you say it's important at various stages to have outside of work?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, whether informally or formally, you know, lots of people now have a proper mentor, you know, a career mentor, and I think that's great. But also, talking things out with other people is really helpful as well. Although I do think that there is a caution attached to that, because I do often actually hear people come through who've had a chat with somebody about their job, or it's often about their salary actually, and they'll come through and say, oh, I've spoken to my dad, and my dad thinks that I should be earning 42 grand as an account manager, and so he said that I should ask you why I'm not at that level. And it's like, what job does your dad do? Like, no context at all for our industry or what's appropriate, I guess. So I think there is a caution in just making sure that whoever you're speaking to has some context and some understanding of the sector that we're in. But I do think it's really helpful to talk things out with other people, and often I think the best people are people that are in the industry but not directly connected to your job. So, you know, somebody who you might know who works at another agency but not necessarily in the same department as you, and it might be a couple of levels above you, or works on a client side, or works for a media owner. So I'm working with a client actually as her mentor, so that's quite an interesting relationship, because she's our client and also I'm her mentor. So there's a slightly strange kind of relationship there, but it's incredibly helpful. You know, it helps me to understand what they're going through at their business, and it really helps her to get some advice from a woman who's a level or two above her in a similar sector, albeit from different sides. But I think often we do get caught in a kind of spiral of our own perspective on things. So to be able to talk stuff out with other people, I just think often helps you. You probably come to the conclusion that you would have come to anyway, but you sort of get there more quickly because you've just talked it through.
What do your clients think about having apprentices? If I was a client, I wouldn't really trust someone.
I've never known a client to be uncomfortable with anybody training in their team, whether as an apprentice or anything else. I think actually most clients think it's brilliant, because they've all been there themselves. You know, everybody has friends or families or daughters or brothers or whatever who have all needed to start somewhere. You know, we all need to start at some entry level point, and as long as they know that you know, you guys aren't going to be spending their budgets without any control, or, you know, creating a document that's going up to their CEO. They're totally cool with it, and I actually think the more you talk about it and involve them in that process, the better. You know, we've done quite a lot of things our side where we might bring clients into our open day when we run our apprenticeships open day, and they come and they talk about the work that they're doing themselves with apprentices, or, you know, how they manage entry-level careers and what it's like working client side. So actually, I think it's a really helpful way of having a slightly different dimension to the relationship that you have with your client. So yeah, I've never known that to be an issue, and I think, you know, as long as the agencies that you're working with train you well and, you know, mentor you well and coach you, then we should be celebrating that with clients, because it's a really good thing that we're doing.
Well, thank you so much. A huge round of applause for Anna Hickey. Thank you.